Okay, so just a quick background. I'm going to just set the scene a little bit with a little story and then talk about why current BI and data warehouse approaches do not work. And then, of course, how BIReady is going to add value to that process, and, of course, a bit of a demonstration and any questions and a wrap up at the end. So here we go, a day in the life of an ETL developer. Now, ironically, every aspect of his life is pretty much automated except for what he does. You know, everything around him is surrounded by automation, and yet he's still writing ETL code. So the designing and building of information systems for BI is not a black art or mystery. It's a set of very well-defined processes that can, of course, then be automated. And Bill Inman describes these processes very well in his books, as does, of course, Dan Lindstedt for the Data Vault, and Ralph Kimball, for all you Kimbalites out there, for building star schema data marts. And as Bill Inman publicly states, you know, ETL has not seen radical change like automation because the major ETL vendors are complacent and do not want to lose market share. So logically, they maintain the status quo to keep selling their products and upgrades. And those are Bill's words. So let's be clear. ETL tools do not build data warehouses. People use ETL tools to build data warehouses. Okay, so ETL tools are very complex to use and require specialized skills, not just to drive them, but to manage everything else around them. You need a data modeler, you need a database administrator, a team of people to gather requirements, to manage the project, document the processes, and test the end result. It becomes very costly and time-consuming, which is why, you know, data warehouse projects are traditionally remaining in the domain of only the biggest companies that could afford them. And of course, they're notoriously risky. In fact, around 80% of data warehouse projects fail or run over time or budget. And that's a stat from Gartner. In our experience, we find that users don't know what they don't know, which is a big problem. And of course, you know, the world is constantly changing, and BI projects are a journey, not a destination, and change is always inevitable. Another stat from Gartner, 76% of BI budgets are sunk in that traditional data warehousing phase, which ties in with a survey I ran on LinkedIn a few years ago where I asked BI experts, how much time do you spend on getting the data prepared for BI? And the number came back 75% or more. So that ties in quite nicely with the Gartner stat. So just setting the scene here. So then, of course, you know, you've got all these reasons why we need data warehouses, and I'm sure there could be one or two entries there or more that will relate to, you know, your particular need. I see we've got you know, more than 20 people on the call today, so you're all here to understand, you know, what's the best way for you to put in a data warehouse. So let's talk about the old, what we'd call the quick way. This is what typically happens when, you know, you engage somebody to come in and build a data warehouse. And so obviously what you want to do is get your data, whatever they are, into a nice report or dashboard at the end. And of course, maybe, you know, popping up in some kind of data mart. And this is, you know, the first part of the problem. A lot of developers make this their target. So what happens? So you get a business analyst to go and ask the business users what it is they want, and they write up some requirements and a functional spec. That gets given to a data modeler, who will then design the model for that data mart. And of course, he'll give you know, some idea of ETL developer, who will do something. He'll write some code here to take the data from there and put it into the data mart. Okay, we're talking about the old quick way now. So he's built something and it goes to the user, and of course they come back and say, sorry, it's not what we want, we need some changes. And now we've got to go back through this process again. But now when it comes to this ETL code, what he did in the first place usually looks a bit like a plate of spaghetti, and now that's got to be unraveled to rework the required changes back into the solution. So even if it was done what we would call the proper way, so instead of that plate of spaghetti, that there's a proper third normal form or a data vault enterprise data warehouse in place, you can very often end up with the same situation, so that when the user sees a final result, you've got to go back through some changes. And now this time, even though you've done it in a more correct way, it's still a timely or a time-consuming and expensive process to make those changes. So what we're saying is that tools and current methods of building data warehouses are forcing you down a waterfall or software development lifecycle path or approach. And that's a big problem because it's, as you can see, it's very risky. A key point here, you're forcing your users to sign off on specifications they might not understand. Remember before we said users don't know what they don't know. They won't know until they see something, what it is that they want. You know, they've got all these complex tasks, data modeling and ETL, lots of tools, lots of skills required, and documentation you need to fill in to pass that information across the different parties involved in the development. And of course, it makes it all very inflexible to change. And the outcome is generally, you know, an expensive and slow delivering project. That if it makes it to the end at all, you know, an 80% failure rate. So you're going to end up with dissatisfied users. And of course, none of this is what we would call agile. So, of course, we believe ETL tools should therefore come in boxes that look like this. So introducing BIReady. So BIReady has now been around nearly 10 years, offices now worldwide. And we believe this is the first true data warehouse automation tool because it does that proper job of building that third normal form or data vault. You can choose. And then from there, we'll build your star schemas for reporting. So we've got all bases covered. You've got Inman, Lindstedt, and Kimball in the one product. Now, BIReady has actually partnered with all of these companies, in particular, Computer Associates. So now there's a version of Irwin that will work with BIReady. And then, of course, organizations like QFire for the data quality, Forest Rim, which is Bill Inman's company that has a textual ETL product now, which is a fascinating product, and some other partners here, Tunity for data movement and Sealwood for connectivity into Oracle and SAP type of systems. Our big news this year is that Bill Inman has joined the BIReady Advisory Board. Now, if you don't know of Bill, he's the father of data warehousing. He coined the term and has written over 50 books on the subject. And more recently, he's been involved in analysis of or getting meaning from big data. And he's got this rather fascinating product called Textual ETL, upon which he's got 9 patents granted. And that product actually pulls unstructured data from sources and puts it into a database that can be interrogated by any BI tool. Very, very interesting product. BIReady. So what does BIReady actually do? Well, you saw that previous diagram. So these are the things that you need to do as part of building your warehouse. So you've got your sources down the bottom here. You've got to perform some sort of ETL process to stage it in, and then more transformation loading into a warehouse, and then build your data marts. And quite literally, BIReady is doing all of that for you. Now, I hear you say, well, Ian, that sounds like a bit of black magic, smoke and mirrors, possibly. What's going on? Well, nothing of the kind. BIReady is taking a model-driven design approach. What that means is that BIReady will plug into your sources and derive their data model. And from that model, it will design and create the target data warehouse automatically for you. It's actually a very, very, very clever process. Once you've got that third normal form or data vault design, so you can choose again, there's a wizard that takes you through the process of building the data marts. And there's even a feature called Data Shop, which will allow you to expose that in Excel as a pivot table. So you can quickly prove the model before you commit to any BI development. So if you need to make a change to the warehouse, it means you're changing the model. And we're going to show you how all of this works in a moment. And needless to say, BIReady can build data warehouses on these target database technologies. So Microsoft SQL Server, DB2, Oracle, Netezza, Teradata, and there's even MySQL and Actian VectorWise coming as well. So the path of the data, so BIReady is doing all the things that a regular ETL developer would do. They're just simply automated, so it's done a lot quicker. So the only things outside of the realm are perhaps some change data capture for legacy data or extractions from mainframes, and even custom cleansing. That's now covered with QFire, which is included, now it's bundled with BIReady. But BIReady is actually doing all the other things that a developer would have to do to build a data warehouse in the data marts. And it does it in exactly the same way as you'd expect a human would do as well. So taking the sources and staging them, and then building the code to load into the warehouse, making allowances for incremental loads and all those kind of things into the data mart, into a data shop if you want to expose it into Excel before you build your reports. So there's no surprises in the way that it does it. So now going back to the BIReady way of building a data warehouse. So literally BIReady is reverse engineering those original sources. It's generating the model and the code for that third normal form or data vault, and then it's pushing the design through via a wizard into the data marts to get your report. So if the user comes back and says, I need something else, the changes made are very quick because everything is kind of there in the application for you to see what can be changed and changes done very quickly. How quickly? Well, when I was doing my due diligence on BIReady a few years ago, I spoke to a company in America, an insurance company, who told me that traditionally they would be taking 3 months to deliver something like this for their users. Now they've got BIReady. If they get the request in the morning, they can generally have it delivered that same afternoon, which I thought was an astounding comment, but that they claim, yeah, absolutely true. So the big difference with BIReady and ETL is that you're no longer investing in the code. There's nothing more painful than when somebody's done 3 months of coding only to find it's wrong, or you've got to throw it away, or you've got to start again, or you've got to make big changes to it. So now your investment is in your design, which BIReady, you know, it's inherent in your source systems, and BIReady is reverse engineering for you. So the amount of time that it saves is enormous. So on that point, what we're seeing now is that whereas it's 75% of that time or more was spent getting the data right, now it's down to half. In fact, usually less. So you can arrive at your nirvana of self-serve reporting and deliver information to all your devices and users wherever they may be, which kind of brings us on to the next products then that are associated with QFire. So QFire is a data quality management tool that puts the control back in the hands of the business user, and it takes a distributed data quality management approach, which means that you can have separate users managing quality for different source systems that then eventually feed into your data warehouse. So it's a very logical, very simple way for your users to manage data quality. Everything's done in plain English. Validation rules, training for a submitter takes about an hour. Very fast to implement, very quick to get up and running. Unfortunately, sorry, I've just noticed there I've got the wrong QFire logo. My apologies, QFire guys listening in. But the point being here is that users can manage that data quality very quickly and easily, and it's all managed in that central interface, and they can understand the quality of the data in the business. So we'll get Tim to show us a bit of that in a moment. I'd also just like to quickly mention Yellowfin, because that will be the BI tool that we're using today in our demonstration. We're not going to do an in-depth thing into Yellowfin today. We'll show bits of it, but we'll perhaps organise a webinar in the coming weeks to do a deeper dive. But Yellowfin is a fabulous Australian success story. They've got over 1 million users globally now, which is more than many of the other vendors actually put together. Very easy to develop and share reports. There's a beautiful, some beautiful features in there for collaboration, all web-based and works across all devices. Just quickly, some features. You've got all the usual kind of interactive dashboards, sharing and collaboration. There's literally a Facebook type of interface built in and a PowerPoint type interface built in. Mobile BI is all covered. Proactive alerts, so the system will tell you when something goes out of whack. All the beautiful data visualizations that you'd expect from a 21st century BI tool, which include, of course, full GIS mapping, which is all built in. There's nothing extra to buy with Yellowfin. Here's an example dashboard from Yellowfin, very sexy, lots of filters and stuff. Here's another example. Here's an example of the social interface. So you can see somebody's annotated a report here. So we're seeing sales and the effect of sales when the Google ads were turned off. So they were turned off here and turned back on here by the looks of it. And there was no noticeable drop in sales. And there's all the commentary between those business users around that information. Very slick. And here's the an example of GIS mapping, which you can go down to street level, by the way, in Yellowfin, because it is using Google Maps. And of course, you've got your full mobile capability as well. So that's my bit over. I'm now going to pass the control to Tim O'Connell, who's going to walk us through a quick demonstration of BIReady, QFire, and Yellowfin. So just bear with me a second. It'll blip out for a second while I pass the presenter. So Tim, over to you.
Hello, everyone. So what I'm going to be doing today with BIReady, Yellowfin, and a bit of QFire is show you what Ian just talked about. I'm going to talk about QFire at the next level down. Start to describe the inner work. Sorry about that. So I'm going to describe how BIReady works and take you through building a data mart from a source system, which is the Microsoft's Northwind database. So you get a feeling for how BIReady works, how to build a report in Yellowfin, and how to incorporate data quality from QFire. And this is all going to happen in the next sort of half an hour. So I'll start off with what does BIReady do. Ian's touched on it from a very high level. What I'm going to do now is take you down a level and explain the steps that we're going to go through here. The first thing we're going to do is define a business model. So the way this happens is we're going to reverse engineer our database, and from that database we're going to take information about tables, about columns, and about relationships, which build our business model. Now that business model is, in the first instance, it's a reflection of the source system, but we can then make adjustments to that if we wanted to incorporate a second database and join it on a key, or we wanted to change some things. Or if we had a database which didn't have relationships, we could build a business model up ourselves or import it from Irwin. So there's a number of ways to create that. It's not a physical structure, it's the logical structure of the database. So then we're going to use that business model, and BIReady is going to automatically build us a data vault warehouse. So it does this by looking at that business model and then deciding on which data goes into what table, and then it builds firm relationships in that warehouse. The third step we're going to go through is we're going to use that business model and the data vault warehouse to build a data mart. So once again, this is automated. We'll just configure what we want in our data mart, and BIReady will do the work for us. The fourth part is we're going to generate the process instructions. So what this means is we're going to take our warehouse, our data mart and our warehouse, and we're going to build the instructions which load the tables in each of those. So this is actually an automated process that's done by BIReady. And if we think about the process of when you're building a warehouse, you have your business analysts, you've got your report developers, you've got your ETL developers, and your report consumers. You've got all these various people acting in different roles. Process 4 is your ETL developers. Process 2 and 3 are your dimensional modelers. But process 4 is getting the data into those models that have been decided. And this process is all automatic. So what you'll see is what I can do in literally 10 seconds is something that would take ETL developers quite a long time to do. Step 5 is we're going to actually execute those process instructions. So we're going to actually see the data appear in those tables. And step 6 step 5, sorry, and then step 6, we're going to go and look in Yellowfin and look at the business intelligence. Parallel to this process of BIReady, we're going to look at some data quality and show how data quality can be integrated into this sort of environment to increase the value of the reports. So what are we creating? We've got a Northwind Traders database, and we're creating a data mart of orders by product and customer. We're creating business intelligence on top of that data mart, and we're going to build some data quality validation. Throughout this presentation, we're going to be acting this out in from three perspectives. The first is our technical user or developer. That's the person that's going to be developing the BIReady data warehouse. We've got our business data owner, who's the person who understands the data, and they would be the person that builds the Yellowfin reports and also builds the QFire data validation. And finally, we've got our report consumer, which is the person that would look through Yellowfin and see the information. So the steps we're going to go through today are in BIReady, we're going to go through these various areas. Then Yellowfin, we'll go through creating that report, and then finally in QFire, we'll go through building that data set. And this process, like I said, is going to take us about half an hour. So what I might do first is I would like when we go to BIReady for you to be familiar with what we're looking at. So what I'm going to do is step through quickly the processes that we're going to go through in the slides and tell you about it all. So that when I go to BIReady and create this, which doesn't take very long, you'll understand what I'm doing. I'll give you a bit of commentary along the way, but this will give you a better understanding of when we go into BIReady. So the first step we're going to do is we connect to environments. So this is literally creating database connections to our source systems. We've got one source system. We're going to link to a repository, and we're going to link to a data warehouse. Our repository we're going to assume is a SQL Server database we've already created, and our data warehouse is also a SQL Server database that we've already created. Both of these are empty, but BIReady will fill those up with some tables. The next step, we're going to initialize a repository. BIReady is going to go look at our repository database and build the tables it needs to store the information about the repository. The next step we'll go through is we're going to reverse engineer the database, and then we're going to look at the specifics of those categories and start to look at how we're capturing history on each of those fields within those tables, and we're going to add a time model in the next step. And that time model will allow us to, on the order date, it'll allow us to categorize the time in various different ways. So, for example, by month, by year, by quarter, by those sort of things. I'll just back a second. The history we're going to look at looking at in this when we edit the model is going to be allow us to do either type 1 or type 2. Type 1 being overriding old data with new data, and type 2 is capturing the history of values so that we understand over time how, for example, if we're looking at a customer, how that customer has changed, for example, if they changed address or something like that. The third type of history that BIReady can do with a Data Vault warehouse is type 6 history, which is a history of a history. And that's a more advanced function, which I'm not going to go into today, but be aware that it exists in the product. We're then going to have a look at our data model we've created. BIReady allows you to visualize that data model. That's pretty straightforward. We're going to then generate processes for the warehouse. So this is the first step of. This will be the process instructions, which are the first step, which load the warehouse tables. This is very straightforward. We're going to press generate process instructions, and then we're going to press start, and it'll generate a few hundred process instructions for us. The next step we're going to do is going to run those, and that's going to populate our data warehouse. And we'll be able to monitor those as they run. So this process will run from inside BIReady, but you could schedule this to run outside of BIReady on a batch process. And the way this process instructions work is in our first load, we're going to load all of our data, but on the second load, the third load, the fourth load, etc., which we run on batch, maybe on a night or hourly or whenever you choose, it's always going to load the new rows and keep our warehouse and our data mart up to date. The next thing we're going to do is create a data mart. The first thing we do is create a skeleton of that data mart, which looks like this. And then we're going to look into detail into the actual refining the data mart a little bit and look at the different ways, the different things we can do in a data mart. And those are things like changing the type of fact. We can remove columns from the data mart or add columns, those sort of things. We can even add new dimensions at this stage as well. We're then going to execute the Postgres instructions to load the data mart, which is going to populate our data mart, and that's going to be the end of the BIReady part of the presentation. So I'm going to step over to BIReady now. I'm going to go through this process step by step. So this is BIReady. As I mentioned, the first thing we're going to do is look at the environments. So if I click, you can see I've got a repository defined. Now I've gone ahead and defined these before the presentation. There's not much point in me filling out these values in front of you. You can see I've got a repository. You can see I've got a warehouse defined, and finally a source system. We can have multiple source systems defined in BIReady. At the moment, we've just got the Northwind Traders source system defined. The next step is to reverse engineer our model. So I've already initialized the repository, which means it's built the tables in that database. So the next step is reverse engineer the model. So we literally reverse engineer. We choose our source database. And it's giving me the option to choose which tables I want to include. So for this demonstration, which is we're going to show orders by region, and we'll include products in there as well. So I've included the tables which are relevant to this. You could reverse engineer all the tables if you want to. You don't have to use all of these in your data marts. So I'm just including the ones I'm going to use in the data marts today. And we could add more of this to more tables to this environment later if we want to. That doesn't affect our processing. You can make adjustments, which is one of the key reasons you would use BIReady. So we press OK. It's going to give me some not supported data types. So what this means is I don't have an nchar type in BIReady. I have a varchar. So it's giving me suggestions on how to change things. So I'll just press OK, and we'll save the repository. So this screen you're seeing here is a version control system. I'm going to save it as version 1 of the repository. If you're making changes to a repository, you could save it as version 1.1, and you can revert back to old versions. So this is a good way of moving forward with your data warehouse iteratively over time, but rolling back if you need to. So we've saved that. So what we'll do now is we're going to have a look at our model. So we press Edit Model, and you'll notice there's 4 tables in our model. There's the customers, the orders, order details, the orders, and the products. You'll also notice on each of the fields we have either type 1 or type 2. This is the ability to move between type 1, which is no history, and type 2, which is like a slowly changing dimension where we're capturing a history of values. And I can easily just go through and change each of those from type 1 to type 2. You'll also see here our relationships to customers. And this is where I can make adjustments to the names and those sort of things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a time model. So I'm going to go out of this, and then we're going to have a look at how that appears in our model. So we go to time model. We're going to add a time model on orders on the order date. So this means for the order date field, we're going to capture all the information about the date times for that field. So this is things like the month, the year, the quarter. We add that, and that time model is now connected. So if I edit our model again, you'll see we've got a time model which has been added to this database. So this time model now exists as part of the data warehouse data model. So we'll leave that now, and what I'm going to do is show you what this looks like. If we hit display, I'll say without attributes, and you can see already has generated a table view of what our data model looks like. I could also show that with attributes, but for the demonstration, this is just showing you how that data model looks. Now, the next step, I'll do a consistency check at stage to check the data model, and repository is fine. There's no warnings. So we're going to go to our next step, which is to generate the data warehouse. So we press Create New. And this has gone into SQL Server, which was our data warehouse, which was where we want to store our data warehouse, and it's actually created those tables and views. If we go Display Data Warehouse, we're going to use the logical names. You'll see that our data warehouse looks like this. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Data Vault, this is a Data Vault data model. And what that means is Data Vault is a way for us to capture things like history of history, and it's also a way for us to be able to upgrade our data warehouse, remove items and add items without causing problems. One of the nice things about BIReady is that it's done this process of creating this Data Vault model, which is going to load for us as well. And this is a process that generally takes quite a long time to do. We're talking probably a couple of weeks to the development work to build this, to design this data model and load it. That's a very conservative estimate. So we've created our data warehouse. We've created the tables. So the next step we're going to go through is we're going to actually load that data warehouse. So we're going to populate. We're going to generate process instructions. And you'll see here, this is called PI set 1, which is the name it's given it. And what we're going to do with this is use this to actually generate those process instructions. So what I do is press start. And you'll see BIReady goes through the various steps of generating those instructions. So you can see that it's created 398 process instructions. If you think about this, this is the ETL jobs and the various components of those ETL jobs. 398 steps are the 398 queries that it's going to run to push data into various places. So you can imagine how that workload translates from this automation to a manual process of creating those individual steps. It's quite a significant amount of work it's just done for us. So what we can then do now is actually populate that data warehouse. So we're going to choose process instruction set 1, and we run that, and you'll now see BIReady actually execute that process. So this monitoring engine actually monitors that. You can see it's a combination of executed scripts and skipped process instructions. The reason things are skipped is because sometimes we're going to use BIReady to manage the updates, not just that first insert. So BIReady does a lot of understanding of what it needs to do at specific times to get the data into the into the warehouse that's relevant at the time. So that's done. Now we have a data warehouse full of data. I think it's been about 15 minutes, 20 minutes so far. So that's pretty impressive to consider that we've gone from a source system into a warehouse. So the next thing we're going to do is use that warehouse and that business model we created to now generate a data mart. So what we do is we click on data mart, we get edit, and we're going to add data mart 1. So this is going to be our first data mart. We're going to start the wizard, and this is where we first define the skeleton of the data mart. This is where we choose the fact, the dimensions, and the date we want to use for transactions. So if in this level of fact, I could choose both of these, and now I'm going to generate an orders fact and a products fact. What I'm going to do though is generate just an order details fact. From our dimensions, we've got the option of choosing orders and products, or we could start going down further and include more dimensions. By choosing just orders and products, what I'm doing is absorbing all the information below them in the hierarchy into those facts, those dimensions. So this is going to create an orders and a products dimension for us. Finally, we're going to choose transaction date and choose order details. And this is going to mean that our fact will be a transaction-oriented fact. So we press OK. Done. So what we're going to do now is have a quick look at the individual tables in the data mart, and this is where we can make changes if we want to. So if we start with the fact, we can decide on our transaction date to measure by, which is order date. And then this will show us the fields that are going to be in the fact. It's going to have a link to products, a link to orders, and the order date is going to be the measurement of our transaction. Then we have unit price, quantity, and discount as measures. If we go to a different table, like for example, the products dimension, we can see these are the fields that are going to be included in our products dimension. We can quite easily just tick these to remove them from our dimension if we want to. For now, I'm going to leave them all in there. So we press OK, and that's our data mart created. So what I can do now is I'm going to create the tables for our data mart. So we'll create our physical tables. Let me press start. Oh, sorry, just show one more thing there. You can see there's the option of virtual as well. BIReady allows you to create that data mart as a virtual data mart, which is a view on the data warehouse. We're going to create them as physical tables though. Then we can use the populate function again, instructions, which is going to load our data mart. So we choose data mart 1. We press start, and that's going to generate our instruction. It's created 94 instructions to load that data mart. We press populating on data mart 1, and this is going to populate our data mart. So you can see those process instructions have run. So what we've done now is we've gone all the way from our source system into a warehouse and then into a data mart. That data mart's got 2 dimensions and a fact table. And for any of you that are listening that are ETL developers or dimensional modelers or BAs, you'll understand how significant the process I just went through was. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at the data mart's data model that we created. And then I'm going to switch over to Yellowfin, where we're going to continue the process from our data mart's data model or to a report, so you can see the way this has worked out. So we have a data mart, and you can see it's got 3 tables: our order fact details table, our products table, and our orders table. So if I then switch over to Yellowfin, I'm just going to refresh this because those tables exist now. Let me just log this and log back in. So what we're going to look at is the view we've created here. So a view is in Yellowfin, a view is an understanding of the source data. So these are our 3 tables once again: our orders, our order details, and our products table. I've already gone ahead and created the relationships for that beforehand. If I have a look at, for example, the products table properties and look at the columns, you can see these are all the columns that we loaded from BIReady. I'm just bringing the product name in through this Yellowfin view. If we look at order details, we can see I'm just bringing the discount, the quantity, and the unit price through. And if we look at the orders, you can see I'm just bringing through the company name, the month name, and the region. So that's our view. What I can do now is I'm going to look at how we use that view to build a report. If we first look at my dashboard here, you can see this is a report that was generated earlier off that view using Yellowfin. It's just a simple pie chart, which is showing me the number of units by region, which is just an aggregate of all the units across the time for the region. And you can see the final one is a large percentage of that is unknown region. If I go to create report, I could then create a second report, which I'll do quickly. We'll do it off our what's the name of the view? I don't remember the name of the view, sorry. Anyway, not important. I have to admit that I'm not as familiar as Yellowfin with BIReady, but the report here is one that I did generate using Yellowfin. So what I'm going to do now is show you, we have this unknown data here on region. And this is actually a potential data quality problem. So what we can do here is go into QFire, which is the data quality product, and we can actually generate a validation rule, which is going to identify this problem. So what we do is we go into QFire, and the first thing we're going to do is build a connection to a database. So QFire allows you to connect to databases. Northwind Traders. We're going to connect to the SQL Server instance. Northwind Traders. We'll test if that works. We're going to choose the database used, which is the ability to use it as a submission template, an export template, or a dataset configuration. Now, this isn't a QFire demo today, so I'm not going into too much detail, but if anyone wants some more detail about QFire, that's obviously something we can do. We press Add. That's created a database connection. We're then going to add a new dataset to QFire. We're going to use the Northwind Traders, and we're going to bring the customers table in. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at our customers table here, and these are the tables, these are the fields that exist in our database. We've got customer name and address, and we've got this region down here, which is our problem. We're just going to set up customer so it's part of the primary key. I'll explain why we did that in a second. So then we go to our validation rules. So validation rules in QFire are rules that you put in place, like a heuristic rule, to understand to isolate the data quality problems that exist in the data. So we're going to create a validation rule group called mandatory rules. And what we're going to do now is create a quick rule which isolates that data quality problem. Region is mandatory. We're going to achieve at a severity of low. That's to the data steward. And what we're going to do is say, when we create a rule in QFire, we've got firstly the list of columns in the data set. Then we have a list, and finally we have a list of reference data sets. So it's a straightforward thing that checking the region's mandatory. So we go text missing, which is our region field. And we'll go is false. This is saying that we always want to have our region field. QFire allows you to get more complicated with these rules. You can do rules that check across columns and down rows, and these get quite complicated. The key feature of this product is that these rules can be on non-technical users. So this data quality process can be administered by your business. So we'll add that rule. See, we now have is mandatory. And what I'm going to do now is load the data into QFire, and then we'll have a look at those region rows. So we go to submission and export definitions. We're going to add a submission definition called load customers from our Northwind Traders customers table. We press add. We're going to go submission screen. And what we're going to do now is load that customer table from our submission definition. Press add, and that's going to load now. So what we can then do, you can imagine I've built one rule, but we could build 20 or 30 rules, and these are all going to find problems in all different places. You could have rules in on all sorts of different tables and databases. So we drill in there, and you can see the region is mandatory, has failed 60 times. And if we drill into that one step further, we can see the individual rows. So this is useful for the people that own the source system. They can then use this to go and fix the problems for these customers. This is the actual customer ID stored in the Northwind database. So you can, once we fix these problems, then that flows through BIReady back into our data marts, and we would see in our Yellowfin report, we would see this unknown start to drop down as these problems are fixed. Back to the presentation now. I didn't show QFire. QFire does data quality scoring. It has a quality firewall which restricts data. It allows you to collect files through the web interface, flat files, CSVs, and it has more complex validation rules. I also didn't show you everything in B. We can view individual process instructions to understand the flow of the data. So when I saw there was 530 process instructions created, we could actually look at each of those and see what they're doing. We can create data marts as physical or virtual, which I mentioned. We can link multiple source systems together. We can adjust the business model and automatically adjust the warehouse and data marts, which I didn't show you, but I talked about. We can have fact tables of different types in BIReady, which allow us to do things like periodic snapshots, accumulated, state-oriented. And another one which is not in this list is we can put in place user-generated process instructions, which run at various steps. So for example, after we've loaded data to staging, we could run process instructions which adjust that data in staging before we load our warehouse. That's also, it's a very flexible product, as is Yellowfin and QFire. I'm now going to hand it back to, I might just turn off the presenter mode and see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Tim. I think we can hear everybody, but yes, does anyone have any questions for myself or Tim?
This is Srinivas, Ian and Tim. It was a very fantastic presentation, a good demo. The first one, hearty congratulations. And I have a few questions in terms of the way the interaction happened between the data quality as well as Yellowfin and bringing it back into BIReady. The interface goes seamlessly through, fantastic. But if there are issues, how to address? And is there any way, like a user help or a context-sensitive help, which can be formulated or enhanced in the future from user perspective?
So, if I'm right, the question is, do you have context-sensitive help for the users in QFire?
Yes, okay. So, QFire, BIReady, when the interfaces happen, how does it work?
So if we're talking about how they interact with each other, BIReady and QFire can be scheduled to run at the same time. And what that means is QFire will pull the data out of the database and do that data quality process automatically using our API. The other thing that can happen is QFire can write data back to BIReady to its database, which BIReady can then introduce into its system. So I kept the demonstration very simple today, but there's a lot of options there.
I understand, yeah. But more of a context sensitive, something fails, if the API fails, how do you figure out and how do we fix it? That's fair.
So how do you fix data quality problems?
No, the interface, the API between, you said that there is an API which goes from QFire, right?
Oh, yeah. So the QFire API is a RESTful API. So over time, the QFire integration with BIReady will come a lot tighter. But at the moment, the way it works is you can set up BIReady to trigger the QFire process using that RESTful API.
And maybe my question, I'm not clear enough. In case of the API is not...
You're a bit unclear. Should we take this question offline and I'll talk you through it?
Okay, that's really good. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep, that'd be a good idea. Any other questions, anybody? Tim, would you mind handing back the presenter control for a moment, if you would? Okay, hopefully you can all hear me still. Sorry, so back to the floor. Were there any other questions at all before we move on to the closing part of our presentation? No? Excellent. Well, look, I'll just... sorry, was that a question there or... No? Okay. Okay, I'll just mute everybody. If you've got any further questions, sorry everybody. If you've got any further questions, please type them into the chat box. That's the little speech bubble in the Join Me control there on the screen. So what I'll do now is I'll just wrap up. Thank you all for attending today. Just quickly before we go, so as next steps, where do we go from here? So we're offering today the BIReady Value Assessment. So this is an exercise of up to 5 days where we can come out and help you, try out BIReady and QFire on your own data. We can do it with Yellowfin, or you can try your own BI tool over on top. But anyway, the point is you're seeing results with your own data, and we're just charging a standard daily rate for that. So it wouldn't cost you any more than $7,500 plus GST, which we will deduct from your purchase of BIReady should you decide to proceed. So it's a low risk investment. So just to recap, so the BIReady benefits, we're talking about boosting your development speed of by a factor of 50 times. It's going to make smaller teams more productive, crushing that development time down from months to weeks, slashing your development costs, and of course supporting any agile development methodologies you may be using, and literally virtually eliminating the risk of project failure. So that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. If you have any questions at all, there's my phone number right there. Do write it down. Of course, you've got it in the emails you've received from me. Feel free to pop me an email if you'd like to know more, or if you'd like to even just have a chat about a more demo rather than like a proof of concept type of exercise. And that's it. So Tim, thank you, and everybody, thank you for joining us. Have a great day.